He ignored his father's calls for years until one day, the phone stopped ringing. At first, it felt like relief. No more awkward silences, no more guilt. Just peace. But then a letter arrived and everything cracked. His father hadn't been distant. He had been watching, helping, sacrificing in silence. Every single day. And now? Too late. No apology. No second chance. Just truth, hitting all at once. So tell me, would you forgive yourself or live with that forever? The phone rang again, sharp, unfamiliar, and at the worst possible time. Lucas almost ignored it. Unknown number. Early morning. Nothing good ever came from that. He let it ring once, twice, then exhaled and picked up. Hello. A pause. Then a calm, professional voice. Is this Lucas Whitman? His grip tightened. Yes, who is this? I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. Something in his chest shifted, small, but immediate. He straightened in his chair, eyes narrowing, searching for a reason, any reason that made sense. Hospital? Why are you calling me? Another pause. Longer this time. We need you to come in as soon as possible. Silence filled the space between them. No explanation. No name. Just that sentence, heavy, unfinished. Lucas stood up without realizing it, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. What is this about? He pressed, voice sharper now. Who is this regarding? But the answer didn't come. Not directly. It's important you get here quickly, sir. The call ended before he could say anything else. Lucas stared at his phone, the screen already dark, his reflection staring back, tense, unsettled, confused. His mind raced, pulling names, faces, possibilities. None of them fit. None of them felt right. And yet, something was wrong. Very wrong. He didn't move right away. The phone was still in his hand, but his world had already split into two places at once. In New York, Lucas Whitman was in control. A senior associate at a high-end law firm, known for closing impossible cases, known for not losing. His office sat high above the city, glass walls, sharp lines, everything precise. People lowered their voices when he walked in. If Lucas takes it, it's done, they'd say. And he liked it that way. Clean. Efficient. No room for emotion. But somewhere far from that skyline, there was a house that didn't fit his life anymore. Old wood. Faded paint. A front porch that creaked every time someone stepped on it. Harold Whitman still lived there. Alone. Lucas hadn't visited in over a year. Calls were easier to ignore than flights to book. Conversations easier to delay than confront. When his father's name lit up his phone, Lucas would glance at it, hesitate for half a second, then silence it. I'll call him later, he'd mutter. He rarely did. To him, Harold was background. A man who had never quite kept up. No big career, no impressive circle, no stories worth telling at dinners in Manhattan. Just a quiet life, in a quiet place, doing things that didn't seem to matter anymore. Yet the call from the hospital lingered, pressing against that carefully built distance. Because for the first time in years, the two worlds were no longer separate. And Lucas had no control over what connected them. And maybe that was the problem, it had always been like this. Lucas tried to remember a single moment when his father said the words out loud. I love you. The memory never came. Not once. Not even on birthdays, not after graduations, not on the nights when everything felt too heavy for a kid to carry alone. What he did remember were smaller things. Quieter things. A kitchen light still on past midnight. Harold sitting at the table, tools scattered around, fixing something that didn't need fixing, just waiting until Lucas got home. Eat something, his father would say without looking up. No hug. No smile. Just a plate already warmed. Lucas used to sit there, chewing in silence, stealing glances at the man across from him. He wanted more. He just didn't know how to ask for it. After his mother passed, the house changed overnight. The laughter disappeared first. Then the conversations. Harold worked longer hours, came home tired, spoke less. He made sure the bills were paid, the fridge was full, the school form signed. Everything was handled. But something was missing. One afternoon, when Lucas was barely 10, he stood in the doorway watching his father struggle to fix a broken sink. Water splashed everywhere, soaking Harold's shirt, but he kept going, jaw tight, refusing to call for help. "Why don't you just get someone?" Lucas asked. Harold didn't look at him. "We don't need someone." That answer stayed longer than it should have. Because to Lucas, it never sounded like strength. It sounded like distance. As the years passed, the pattern never changed. Harold showed up to every game, every ceremony, but always from a few steps away. Clapping quietly. Leaving early. Never saying what Lucas secretly needed to hear. And somewhere along the way, a question took root, growing sharper with time. Did he actually love me, or was he just doing what he had to? That question didn't stay quiet for long. It started to change the way Lucas saw everything. It showed up first at school. Small moments. Quick glances. The kind that linger just long enough to sting. "Your dad still drives that old truck?" one of his classmates asked, half laughing. Lucas forced a shrug. "Yeah, it still works." But the laughter didn't stop there. It spread, quiet at first, then louder, more confident. Another day after practice, a group of boys stood by the parking lot, watching as Harold pulled up. The truck rattled as it stopped, paint chipped, engine louder than it should be. Harold leaned over to open the passenger door from inside. "You coming?" he called out. Lucas froze. Someone behind him whispered, not even trying to hide it. "Man, that's your ride?" A short laugh. Then another. Lucas felt the heat rise to his face. His chest tightened, not from anger, but from something worse. Embarrassment. "I'll walk," he muttered quickly, not looking at his father. Harold paused, confused. "It's getting late." "I said I'll walk." The words came out sharper than he meant them to. A brief silence followed. Just long enough to notice. Then Harold nodded once. "All right." No argument. No questions. He simply closed the door and drove off. The truck's sound faded, but the moment stayed. Lucas stood there, pretending it didn't matter, forcing a smirk like everyone else. But inside, something shifted. Something colder. Because from that point on, it wasn't just doubt anymore. It was distance, chosen, not accidental. By the time Lucas built his life in New York, that distance had already become part of who he was. Clean, controlled, carefully edited. And that was exactly how Meg and Cole met him. They were at a networking event, bright lights, polished conversations, glasses clinking softly. Megan noticed him before he noticed her. Not because he was loud, but because he wasn't. While everyone else tried too hard, Lucas stood still, listening, choosing his words like they mattered. "You don't talk much, do you?" she said later, stepping beside him. He gave a slight smile. "Only when it counts." That answer should have ended it. But it didn't. Weeks turned into months, and Megan began to see more. The discipline. The ambition. The way Lucas never lost control, except in very small, almost invisible moments. like when his phone lit up and he flipped it over instantly. One evening, sitting across from him at dinner, she noticed it again. The screen glowed briefly before disappearing. "Who was that?" she asked casually. "No one important." Too quick. Too smooth. Megan tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You always say that." Lucas shrugged, cutting into his food. "Because it's true." But it didn't feel true. Not to her. Days later, it happened again. This time, she reached for his hand before he could move away. "Lucas," she said quietly, "you don't have to hide things from me." "I'm not hiding anything." A beat of silence. Just long enough to feel the tension settle between them. Megan didn't push harder. Not yet. She simply leaned back, watching him in a way that made him uncomfortable without saying a word. Because she wasn't convinced. And for the first time, someone was close enough to notice. Close enough to ask the question he kept avoiding. "What are you not telling me?" That question didn't fade, it lingered, quietly pressing against everything Lucas tried to keep sealed. Because the truth was, Megan wasn't the only one noticing. The calls had been coming more often lately. Not urgent, not dramatic, just steady. Predictable. Almost patient. His phone would light up in the middle of meetings. During dinners. Late at night. Harold Whitman. Lucas would glance at it, just for a second. Thumb hovering. Always that same pause. Then decline. Or silence. "I'll call him back later," he'd mutter, more to himself than anyone else. He rarely did. At first, it felt justified. He was busy. Important deadlines. Clients who couldn't wait. That was the life he built, after all. Priorities had shifted. That was normal, right? But the calls didn't stop. They came the next day. And the day after. Same name. Same quiet persistence. One evening, Megan noticed it again. The phone buzzed on the table, vibrating slightly against the glass surface. "You're not going to answer?" she asked. Lucas didn't look up. "It's nothing." "It's your father, isn't it?" That made him pause. Just for a moment. "Yeah," he said finally. "Then why don't you pick up?" Lucas exhaled, leaning back. "Because it's always the same conversation. And that is." A short silence. He asks how I am. I say I'm busy. Then it ends. Megan studied him, her voice softer now. "And that's enough for you?" Lucas didn't answer. He reached for his glass instead, taking a sip he didn't need. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. But the feeling didn't. Because even as the room returned to normal, something stayed behind, subtle, uncomfortable, hard to ignore. A thought he kept pushing away, but never quite escaped. Should I have answered that? That thought should have stayed small. Easy to ignore. But it didn't. It followed him, into the next morning, into the quiet moments between conversations, into the spaces where nothing else could distract him. And then it happened again. The phone lit up. Same name. Same number. Harold Whitman. Lucas stared at it longer this time. Not just a glance, he actually picked it up. The vibration hummed against his palm, steady, almost calm. For a second, everything else faded. The office noise, the city outside, even Megan's voice somewhere behind him, it all blurred. Just the call. Waiting. "Are you going to answer?" Megan asked softly. He didn't respond right away. His thumb hovered over the screen, close enough to end it, close enough to change everything. "I don't know what to say," he admitted under his breath. "You don't have to say anything perfect," she replied. "Just say something." The ringing continued. Not louder. Not more urgent. Just constant. Lucas swallowed. His chest tightened in a way he couldn't explain. And then he flipped the phone over. The sound cut off instantly. Silence. Too sudden. Too clean. Megan didn't speak this time. She just watched him, searching his face for something he refused to show. "That's not nothing," she said quietly. Lucas stood up, already reaching for his jacket. "I have a meeting." It wasn't true, but it gave him a reason to leave. Behind him, the phone remained on the table. Dark. Still. No missed call notification. No message. Nothing. Just the absence of something that had been there seconds before. And for reasons he couldn't name, that silence felt heavier than the ringing ever did. Because a thought slipped in, quiet, unwelcome, impossible to shake. What if that was the last time he tried? That thought didn't leave him. It followed him out the door, into the elevator, into the street where the city kept moving like nothing had changed. Lucas told himself it was nothing. Just another call. Just another day. Until his phone rang again. Different number. He almost ignored it. Almost. Then something, instinct, maybe, made him answer. "Hello. Is this Lucas Whitman?" The voice was calm, professional. Too calm. "Yes. Who is this?" "This is St. Mary's Hospital." Everything in him went still. Not slowly. Instantly. "Hospital." His voice tightened. "Why are you calling me?" A brief pause. Papers shifting on the other end. Then, "Your father has been admitted in critical condition." The words didn't land all at once. They came apart, piece by piece. "Your father. Critical condition." Lucas blinked, as if that could correct what he'd just heard. "What do you mean, critical?" "He collapsed earlier this morning. We've been trying to reach you." "Trying." The word hit harder than the rest. "How long?" Lucas asked, his voice lower now. "Several hours. Several hours." His grip tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. Images flashed, calls he ignored, screens he turned away from, that last vibration still echoing in his memory. Is he awake?" Another pause. Short, but enough. "No, sir." Something dropped inside him. Heavy. Final. "We recommend you come as soon as possible." The line stayed open for a second longer, as if waiting for him to say something. But Lucas had nothing. Because for the first time, that question he kept pushing away came back louder than ever, and this time, it didn't feel like a thought anymore. It felt like a warning he had already missed. The call ended, but Lucas was already moving. No hesitation this time. No delay. Just action, fast, urgent, almost mechanical. Keys. Jacket. Phone. He didn't remember leaving the building. He didn't remember the drive to the airport. Everything blurred into motion, into noise, into a single thought repeating louder with every step. Not too late. Not too late. On the plane, he couldn't sit still. His knee bounced, his fingers tapped against the armrest, his eyes fixed on nothing. Every minute stretched longer than it should have. "Sir, would you like something to drink?" a flight attendant asked gently. Lucas shook his head. "No. I'm fine." He wasn't. His phone stayed in his hand the entire flight. Screen dark. No updates. No messages. Just silence that felt heavier than any words could. When the plane finally landed in Chicago, he was already unbuckling before the announcement finished. Moving too fast. Breathing too shallow. Taxi. Traffic. Red lights that lasted forever. "Can you go faster?" he snapped. The driver glanced at him through the mirror. "I'm trying." But it wasn't fast enough. Nothing felt fast enough. By the time Lucas reached the hospital, The world had narrowed into a single point, one hallway, one door, one answer waiting on the other side. He rushed to the front desk. "Harold Whitman, what room?" The nurse looked at her screen, then back at him. Her expression changed. Subtle, but enough. "I'm sorry, are you his son?" Lucas nodded quickly. "Yes." "Where is he?" A pause. "Too long." Then, quietly, "Please come with me." They didn't take him to a room. They led him somewhere else. And, before anyone said it out loud, Lucas already knew. Knowing didn't make it easier. It just made everything quieter. The days that followed passed in fragments, papers to sign, brief conversations, people speaking in softened voices as if anything louder might break something that was already gone. Lucas moved through it all without resistance, without questions. Just forward. Until the funeral. It was held in a small chapel just outside the neighborhood where Harold had lived for decades. Lucas arrived early, expecting something. A crowd, maybe. Old coworkers. Friends he had never met. Evidence that his father had existed beyond the narrow version Lucas had kept in his mind. But the room stayed mostly empty. A few chairs filled slowly. An elderly couple sitting close together. A man in work clothes standing near the back. Someone Lucas vaguely recognized from years ago, though he couldn't place where. That was it. Lucas stood near the front, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the room again as if more people might appear if he waited long enough. "They'll come," he murmured under his breath. But no one did. The service began. Quiet words. Simple prayers. The kind that didn't ask much and didn't promise anything either. Lucas barely heard them. His attention kept drifting to the empty seats, to the silence between each line, to the absence that felt wrong. Because this didn't match the man he thought he knew. Or maybe it matched too perfectly. After the service, people approached him one by one. Brief nods. Short condolences. "Your father was a good man," the older woman said, her voice steady but distant. Lucas gave a polite nod. "Thank you." The man in work clothes stepped forward next. Hesitated. Then added quietly, he didn't talk much, but he showed up when it mattered. Lucas frowned slightly. "For what?" The man looked at him, surprised by the question. "For people." A beat passed. Lucas didn't respond. Because for the first time, something didn't fit. Not the silence. Not the small crowd. But the way everyone seemed to know a version of his father that he didn't. Lucas didn't expect anything after the funeral. Not really. Whatever answers existed, he assumed they had already slipped past him, buried somewhere between silence and missed calls. But the man who approached him didn't leave. "My name is Bennett," he said, extending a hand. "I handled some legal matters for your father." Lucas hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking it. "Legal matters?" Bennett studied him briefly, as if measuring how much to say. "Your father asked me to find you. Specifically today." Something in Lucas's chest tightened again. "Find me, for what?" Instead of answering directly, Bennett reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. Plain. Unremarkable. Except for one thing, Lucas's name, written carefully across the front in handwriting he recognized instantly. His father's. Lucas stared at it longer than he should have. His fingers didn't move at first. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "Something he wanted you to have," Bennett replied. "Along with his will." That word landed differently. Heir. Assets. Closure. That was what Lucas expected. Something structured. Predictable. But this didn't feel like that. Is there anything I should know before I open it? Lucas asked. Bennett gave a small, almost unreadable smile. Only that your father was more deliberate than he appeared. Deliberate. Lucas let that sit for a moment before finally taking the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, but in a way he couldn't explain. And the will? Lucas pressed. It's included, Bennett said. But I would suggest reading the letter first. Why? Another pause. Short, controlled. Because it explains everything. Lucas frowned slightly. Everything? That didn't make sense. There wasn't that much to explain. Not really. Still, he didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he held it there, staring at his own name written by a man he had barely listened to, until it was too late. And for reasons he couldn't ignore, a single thought surfaced, sharp, unsettling. What exactly did he think I didn't know? Lucas didn't open it right away. He walked out of the funeral home, the envelope still sealed in his hand, as if breaking it too soon might release something he wasn't ready to face. The air outside felt colder than it should have. Quieter. He finally sat down on a bench across the street. No one around. No noise except distant traffic. Slowly, he turned the envelope over. His name stared back at him again. Careful. Steady. Familiar. His thumb slid under the flap. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Lucas unfolded it, his eyes scanning the first line. Lucas, that was it. No, dear son. No formality. Just his name. He swallowed. If you're reading this, I guess I didn't get the chance to say it in person. Lucas exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on the page. I know I wasn't the kind of father you needed. I figured that out a long time ago. But I didn't know how to be anything else. His eyes stopped there. Just for a second. Then moved again. You probably thought I didn't care. That I kept my distance because it was easier. Truth is, I stayed quiet because I didn't want to say the wrong thing and push you further away. Lucas shook his head slightly, almost unconsciously. So I chose actions over words. I thought if I just kept showing up, it would be enough. A faint breath left him. Not quite a laugh. Not quite disbelief. I saw you more than you think. Even when you didn't see me. I was there, just not close enough for you to notice. Lucas's fingers pressed harder into the paper. That line lingered longer than the rest. I'm not writing this to make you feel bad. You don't owe me anything. I made my choices, and I can live with them. Another pause. But there are things you don't know. Things I didn't say, because I thought there would be time. Time. That word hit differently now. Lucas stared at the page, the edges trembling slightly in his hand. And for the first time since opening the letter, he didn't feel confused anymore. He felt pulled in. Because whatever came next was something his father had waited too long to say. Lucas read that last line again, slower this time. I thought there would be time. Something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't just regret. It sounded like a warning. Like there was more, something unfinished. He looked back into the envelope. There was another document. Thicker. Official. He pulled it out, unfolding it carefully. Legal formatting. Numbers. Account details. His name appeared again, this time printed, not handwritten. A bank statement, he murmured under his breath. At first, it didn't register. Just lines of text. Columns. Dates. Transfers. Then his eyes stopped. The balance. He blinked. Once. Then again. No. That couldn't be right. Lucas leaned forward, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. He scanned the number again, slower, forcing himself to read each digit one by one. It didn't change. It only became clearer. A large sum. Not just savings. Not just a retirement fund. This was significant. Enough to reshape a life. "What is this?" he whispered. His mind immediately rejected it. There had to be a mistake. Wrong account. Wrong person. His father didn't have this kind of money. That wasn't possible. He flipped the page. More transactions. Regular deposits. Small at first. Then larger. Consistent. Over years. Years. Lucas's breathing slowed, not from calm, but from disbelief settling deeper. This wasn't sudden wealth. This was built. Carefully. Quietly. His eyes moved to the account holder's name. Harold Whitman. No mistake. A chill ran through him. Because the number wasn't the only thing that felt wrong. It was what it implied. Every ignored call. Every moment he assumed there was nothing there. Lucas stared at the statement, then back at the letter still resting on his lap. His father hadn't just left words behind. He had left something else. Something Lucas had never even considered. And suddenly, the question changed. Not why didn't he tell me? But something far more unsettling. How long has this been happening, without me knowing? Lucas kept reading, but this time slower, because something inside him already knew the next lines wouldn't make it easier. "You're probably wondering where the money came from." He let out a quiet breath. Of course he was. That was the only thing that made sense to ask. "It wasn't from the job you knew." Lucas's eyes tightened. "After you left for New York, I started working nights. Small jobs at first. Repairs. Cleaning. Anything I could take without being noticed." The words didn't hit all at once. They settled in, piece by piece, each one heavier than the last. Nights. After he left. Lucas lowered the paper slightly, staring at nothing for a second as images began to form, ones he had never actually seen, but now couldn't stop imagining. Harold, alone in that house. Finishing dinner at a quiet table. Then getting up again, not to rest, but to leave. To work. "I didn't even know," Lucas whispered under his breath. His eyes moved again. "I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't like it. You had your own life to build. I didn't want to become a burden." That word landed harder than anything before. Burden. Lucas swallowed, his grip tightening around the letter. How many times had he thought that exact thing without saying it out loud? Some nights were long. Some were harder than I expected. But I kept going. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to make sure you never had to struggle the way I did. Lucas shook his head slowly, a quiet disbelief mixing with something deeper, something sharper. Because suddenly, everything started connecting. The calls. The timing. The persistence. And him, declining them. Silencing them. "I was too busy," he muttered, but the excuse felt hollow the moment it left his lips. "You never asked where things came from." "I didn't blame you for that. I just kept saving. Little by little. It added up over time." Lucas let the paper drop slightly into his lap, his eyes unfocused now. A thought rose, uninvited, unavoidable. What was I doing while he was doing all of this? The question didn't need an answer. Because deep down, he already knew. Lucas didn't notice how long he had been sitting there until Megan's voice pulled him back. "Lucas," she said softly. "There's something you need to see." He looked up, still holding the letter loosely, eyes distant. "What is it?" "Inside the house," she replied. "I was looking for. I don't know anything. And I found a box." A box. It sounded simple. Too simple. but something in her tone made him stand up immediately. They walked back in silence. The house felt different now, smaller, heavier, like every corner was holding something unspoken. Megan led him to the living room. The box sat on the table. Old. Dust along the edges. Untouched for years. "I didn't open everything," she said. "I thought you should be here." Lucas nodded, though his hand hesitated before reaching for it. Then slowly, he lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was a photograph. Him. Younger. Maybe 10 years old. Standing outside his school. Smiling, genuinely smiling. Lucas frowned. "I don't remember this." "Look closer," Megan said. He did. In the background, barely noticeable, Harold. Standing across the street. Not next to him. Not in the frame. Just there. Watching. Lucas's breath caught. He picked up another photo. Different day. Different place. Same pattern. Always there. Never close. "What is this?" he whispered. Megan didn't answer. She was already pulling out a stack of papers beneath the photos. Receipts. Lucas took one, then another. His eyes scanned quickly dates, amounts, locations. Late-night hours. Hardware stores. Medical bills. Tuition payments. His name appeared again. And again. Paid. Covered. Settled. "No," he murmured, shaking his head. "This doesn't make sense." But it did. Too much sense. Every missing piece. Every unexplained moment. They weren't empty. They were filled, just not in a way Lucas had ever looked for. Megan held up one last photo, her voice quieter now. "You should see this." Lucas took it. And this time, there was no distance. It was taken from close range. Harold standing right behind him, one hand slightly raised, as if he almost reached out, but didn't. Lucas's fingers tightened around the edges. Because suddenly, it wasn't just what he was seeing. It was what he had never seen before. Lucas didn't put the photo down right away. Something about it felt unfinished, like it was pointing to something he hadn't fully understood yet. "Turn it over," Megan said quietly. He did. There was a date. And beneath it, an address. Lucas frowned. The location looked familiar. Too familiar. His eyes narrowed as recognition slowly crept in. "That's my office building," he said under his breath. The room went still. Megan didn't respond. She didn't need to. Lucas was already moving. He grabbed his phone, fingers shaking slightly as he pulled up old emails, schedules, anything tied to that date. Meetings. Clients. Late nights. He found it. A major case. The kind that had kept him in the office past midnight. The kind he had been proud of. His chest tightened. Without thinking, he opened his laptop and searched the building's security archive, records he still had access to. A few clicks. A password. Then the footage loaded. Grainy. Black and white. The timestamp matched the date on the photo. Lucas leaned closer. At first, nothing. Just the lobby. People coming and going. Then, a figure appeared near the entrance. Older. Slightly hunched. Standing still longer than anyone else. Lucas froze. "Wait." The man stepped closer to the glass doors, but didn't enter. He adjusted his jacket, looked inside, then took a small step back. It was Harold. Clear enough now. No doubt. Lucas's breath caught sharply. No, the footage continued. Harold stood there for several minutes. Watching. Waiting. Every time the door opened, he shifted slightly, as if deciding whether to walk in. He never did. Instead, after one final glance inside, he turned, and walked away. Just like that. Lucas pushed back from the screen, shaking his head, but his eyes stayed locked on the image frozen in front of him. He was there, he said, voice barely holding. He came all the way there, and I didn't even know. Megan's voice was softer now. Maybe he didn't want to interrupt your life. But that explanation didn't help. It made it worse. Because Lucas remembered that night. The long hours. The frustration. The moment he stepped outside for a break, brief, distracted, checking his phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. Except now, he knew that wasn't true. His father had been there. Just a few steps away. Close enough to see him. Close enough to speak. And still, he chose not to. Lucas's hands dropped to his sides, numb, heavy. Because this wasn't distance anymore. This was something else. Something that felt a lot more like goodbye. Lucas didn't look away from the screen, even after the footage stopped. It was as if moving his eyes would make it more real, make it final in a way he wasn't ready to accept. Megan watched him for a moment, then stepped closer. Lucas, he didn't respond. You saw it, she continued, her voice firmer now. He was there. He came to see you. I know what I saw, Lucas snapped, a little too quickly. The words hung in the air, sharper than he intended. Megan didn't back off this time. Then stop acting like it doesn't mean anything. Lucas finally turned, his expression tight. What do you want me to say? I want you to be honest, she said, holding his gaze. With me. With yourself. He let out a dry breath, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know he was there. How is that my fault? Megan's eyes didn't soften. You didn't know, because you never made space to know. That landed. Lucas shook his head immediately. That's not fair. Isn't it? She pressed. He called you. Over and over. You ignored him. You said it yourself. I was busy. With what? She cut in. Work? Meetings? Things that can wait. They couldn't wait, Lucas shot back, his voice rising. More than him. The question hit harder than anything else. Silence followed. Thick. Uncomfortable. Lucas looked away first, jaw tightening. You don't understand. Then help me understand, Megan said, softer now, but not backing down. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like he spent years trying to stay close, and you spent years making sure he couldn't. Lucas felt something twist inside his chest. Not anger exactly, but close enough to burn. That's not what I was doing, he muttered. Then what were you doing? He didn't answer. Because for the first time, he didn't have one. Lucas didn't answer, but his mind already had. It just didn't come out in words. It came back as a memory. Clear. Sharp. Unavoidable. It hit him without warning. A different night. Same city. Same building. He had just finished a long day, stepping out of his office, loosening his tie, already thinking about the next meeting. His phone buzzed, Harold Whitman. Lucas sighed, pressing decline without even stopping. But this time, the call came again. And again. Annoyance crept in. He answered. What is it? Lucas said, his voice tight. A pause. Then Harold's voice, quieter than usual. I'm nearby. Lucas frowned, glancing around the empty hallway. Nearby where? Outside your building. That made him stop. Just for a second. You came here? Yes. I was hoping maybe we could talk. Just for a few minutes. Lucas looked at the glass doors at the end of the corridor. Beyond them, the city lights blurred into the night. For a moment, he considered it. Just a moment. Then something hardened. I'm busy, he said flatly. It won't take long, Harold replied. I just wanted to see you. The words hung there, simple, honest. Lucas exhaled, frustration building. This isn't a good time. I understand, Harold said quickly. I can wait. That was it. That was the moment. Lucas's grip tightened around his phone. No, he said, sharper now. You don't need to wait. Silence. Then, softer, Lucas, I said no, he cut him off. You can't just show up like this. I have a life here. Another pause. Longer this time. All right, Harold answered. No argument. No anger. Just that one word. Lucas ended the call before anything else could be said. Back then, it felt justified. Necessary. Now, standing in the same space, the memory twisted into something else entirely. Because he finally understood what that moment really was. Not an interruption. Not a mistake. It was a chance. And he was the one who turned it away. Lucas stood there, but the room no longer felt the same. Every piece of it, every photo, every receipt, every word from that letter, had started to rearrange something inside him. At first, it was confusion. Then resistance. Now, it was something else. He let out a slow breath, running both hands through his hair, pacing once across the room before stopping again. No, this doesn't make sense, he muttered. But it did. Too much. Megan didn't interrupt. She just watched, letting the silence stretch until Lucas filled it himself. I thought, he began, then stopped. The sentence collapsed before it could form. You thought what? She asked gently. Lucas laughed once, short, hollow. I thought he didn't try. The words hung there. And for the first time, Lucas heard how wrong they sounded. His eyes drifted back to the box, to the evidence he could no longer ignore. The photos. The dates. The nights. The calls. He was always there, Lucas said, quieter now. Not a question. A realization. Megan nodded slightly. Just not in the way you expected. That hit harder than anything before. Because suddenly, everything flipped. Not gradually. Not gently. All at once. Every moment Lucas had labeled as distance wasn't distance at all. It was restraint. Every silence he thought was indifference was actually hesitation. Every missed call wasn't absence. It was persistence. Lucas stepped back, as if the weight of it physically pushed him. I had it backwards, he whispered. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. I kept thinking he didn't care, he continued, voice tightening. But he was the only one who never stopped. No one corrected him. No one needed to. Because this wasn't something to argue. It was something to face. Lucas looked down at his hands, still holding pieces of a story he had misunderstood for years. And in that moment, the truth landed not slowly, not gently, but with a force that left no space to deny it. He hadn't been neglected. He had been loved. In a way he refused to see. Lucas didn't move for a while after that realization. It settled into him, heavy and irreversible. But before he could step away, Megan reached back into the box. There's one more thing, she said quietly. He looked up, slower this time. What is it? She held up a small, worn recorder. Old. Scratched. The kind no one used anymore. Lucas frowned. What's that doing here? I think it's for you, Megan replied, placing it in his hand. It felt light. Too light for something that suddenly carried so much weight. Lucas hesitated, then pressed play. A brief hiss. Static. Then Lucas. His breath caught instantly. It was Harold's voice. Not imagined. Not remembered. Real. Close. Lucas's fingers tightened around the recorder. I'm not really sure how to start this, the voice continued, softer than Lucas had ever heard it. I guess I never was good at saying things the right way. Lucas swallowed hard, eyes fixed on nothing. So I thought, maybe if I say it like this, it'll be easier. A small pause. You could hear him breathe. I know I didn't talk much. I know there were things you probably needed to hear, and I didn't say them. Lucas's jaw tightened. That's on me, Harold went on. Not you. Another pause. Longer this time. But I want you to know something, son. The word hit harder than anything before. Every step you took. I saw it. Every late night, every win, every time you kept going when things got hard. Lucas's vision blurred slightly. He didn't blink. I was proud of you then, Harold said. I'm still proud of you now. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It pressed in, filling every space Lucas had tried to protect. I didn't say it enough, the voice added, quieter now. Maybe not at all. But I never stopped feeling it. Lucas let out a shaky breath, his shoulders dropping as if something inside him finally gave way. And even if you didn't need me the way I hoped, Harold continued, I never stopped being your father. The recording clicked softly as it ended. Lucas didn't press stop. He didn't move. Because for the first time in his life, he had heard the words he had been waiting for. The recording ended, but the words didn't. They stayed, echoing, repeating, refusing to fade. Lucas's hand trembled as he lowered the device. For a second, he just stood there, breathing unevenly, like his body didn't know what to do with everything that had just hit him. Then something snapped. Why didn't you say it? He shouted suddenly, the words tearing out of him before he could stop them. Megan flinched. Lucas, but he wasn't listening. Why didn't you just say it to me? His voice rose, cracking under the weight of something far bigger than anger. He turned, pacing fast now, hands gripping his hair. All those years, all those chances. His eyes landed on the table, the photos, the papers, the recorder, and in one sharp motion, he swept everything to the floor. The sound was loud, violent. Glass shattered. The noise filled the room, but it didn't release anything. Not enough. Lucas kicked the chair aside, breathing harder. I was right there, he muttered, his voice shaking. I was right there, and I didn't see it. He grabbed a frame from the shelf and threw it against the wall. It cracked on impact, splintering into pieces that scattered across the floor. Damn it. Megan stepped closer, cautious. Lucas, stop, no, he snapped, turning toward her, eyes burning. Don't tell me to stop. Not now. Silence followed, but it didn't calm him. It made everything louder. Lucas's chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked around the room, at the mess, at the broken glass, at the pieces of a life he had misunderstood. Then his voice dropped. Lower. Raw. I did this. The words didn't come out strong. They came out, broken. I pushed him away. Every time. He shook his head slowly, like he still couldn't believe it. He was there, and I made sure he stayed out there. His knees gave slightly, and he leaned against the table for support, hands gripping the edge tightly. I thought I was too busy, he whispered. Too important. A bitter breath escaped him. I wasn't. The anger didn't disappear. It turned. Inward. Sharper. Because now there was no one else to blame. Only himself. The room slowly fell quiet again, but the damage remained on the floor, in the air inside him. Lucas didn't try to fix anything. Not yet. He just stood there, breathing, staring at what was left. Megan didn't speak this time. She simply bent down, picking up the scattered papers one by one. Careful, patient, as if each piece still mattered. "Lucas," she said after a moment, holding up a document. "This looks like the will." He didn't respond immediately. His shoulders were still tense, his mind still caught somewhere between anger and regret. "Just read it," she added softly. Lucas took a step closer, slower now, like every movement required effort. He reached for the paper, unfolding it with hands that hadn't fully steadied yet. His eyes moved across the lines, scanning at first legal terms, formal language, until something made him stop. A specific clause. He read it again. Then again. "What?" Megan looked at him. "What is it?" Lucas didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed locked on the page, as if the words might change if he stared long enough. "He left everything to me," he said finally. "That's not surprising," Megan replied gently. "No, that's not it." Lucas's voice dropped, quieter now. "There's a condition." Silence filled the space again, but this time it carried something different, something tighter. "What kind of condition?" Lucas exhaled slowly, reading the line out loud, almost like he needed to hear it to believe it. "I have to live here, in this house, for 1 full year." Megan blinked. "A year?" He nodded faintly. "No selling. No renting. No leaving it empty." The words felt deliberate. Precise. Like they had been chosen carefully, for a reason he hadn't fully understood yet. "And if you don't?" she asked. Lucas's eyes shifted to the next line. "Then everything gets donated." A quiet pause followed. Lucas lowered the paper slightly, his gaze drifting around the house, the worn walls, the silence, the memories pressing in from every corner. A year. Not money. Not control. Time. And for the first time since everything began unraveling, he felt something new take hold. Not anger. Not shock. Something closer to being forced to stay. To face what he had spent years avoiding. Lucas didn't argue with the condition. Not because he fully understood it, but because something inside him knew he couldn't walk away again. Not this time. The first few days felt unnatural. Too quiet. Too slow. He woke up earlier than he needed to, out of habit, only to realize there was nowhere urgent to be. No meetings. No deadlines. Just the house. And the silence. At first, he tried to fill it calls, emails, distractions, but none of it lasted. The walls seemed to push everything back at him. So eventually, he stopped trying. He began noticing things instead. The kitchen light switch that stuck slightly before turning on. The chair by the window, worn more on one side. The faint scratches on the table, marks left by years of use, not neglect. One evening, he found himself standing in the same spot he had seen in the photos. By the doorway. Looking out. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, almost unconsciously, he stepped outside. The air felt different here. Still. Grounded. Lucas looked across the street, and for the first time, he didn't just see the road. He imagined it. His father standing there. Waiting. Watching. Not stepping closer. Not calling out. Just staying. "Why didn't you come over?" Lucas whispered, though no one was there to answer. The question lingered, but this time, it didn't feel accusing. It felt understanding. Days turned into routines. Simple ones. Fixing things around the house. Cooking his own meals. Sitting at the table longer than necessary. And slowly, something shifted. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But enough. Because the life Lucas had once dismissed as small wasn't empty at all. It was deliberate. Quiet, yes. but full in ways he had never taken the time to see. And now, living it step by step, he began to feel something he hadn't expected. Not guilt this time. Something deeper. He was starting to understand what it meant to stay. It didn't come all at once. Not like the shock before. This time, it unfolded slowly, quiet, steady, undeniable. Lucas was in the garage when it finally settled. A place he had barely noticed before. Tools lined up neatly. Old. Worn. Used not occasionally, but constantly. He picked one up. A wrench. The handle was smoothed down, not from time alone, but from repetition. Nights. Effort. His chest tightened. Then he saw it. A small notebook on the shelf. He opened it. Dates. Hours. Payments. Short entries. No emotion. No explanation. Just records. 10:45 p.m. Plumbing repair 1:20 a.m. Warehouse cleaning 3:10 a.m. Done. Lucas stopped breathing for a second. Every page told the same story. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just consistently. He flipped faster now. Week after week. Month after month. No breaks. No complaints. Just work. For me, he whispered, the words barely audible. And suddenly, everything aligned. Not as pieces anymore, but as a whole he could no longer deny. The silence. The distance. The missed words. They weren't absence. They were cost. Harold hadn't failed to show love. He had chosen a form of it Lucas never respected. A life built not around being seen, but around making sure his son never struggled. Lucas closed the notebook slowly, his hands no longer shaking, but heavier than before. Because this wasn't just realization. It was clarity. A kind that didn't ask for forgiveness. Only truth. And for the first time, Lucas didn't feel like a victim of what he lacked. He saw exactly what he had been given. Everything. By the time the year came to an end, the house no longer felt like a condition. It felt like a conversation, one Lucas had been forced to stay long enough to finally hear. He stood in the living room one last time, looking around not as someone passing through, but as someone who understood what had been built there. The worn edges, the quiet corners, the space that had once felt empty now carried weight. Megan leaned against the doorway. So, what are you going to do? Lucas didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly across the room, pausing at the table, the chair by the window, the door he had walked through so many times this past year. I'm going to sell it, he said finally. Megan nodded, not surprised. And the money? That was the part that used to matter. The part that would have defined everything before. Lucas let out a small breath, almost a quiet release. I'm not keeping it. She straightened slightly. Not even part of it? He shook his head. It was never really mine to begin with. Silence followed, but it felt different now, lighter, steadier. Lucas reached for the light switch, his hand pausing for just a second before turning it off. The room dimmed, shadows settling in naturally. For the first time, letting go didn't feel like loss. It felt right. Letting go didn't end anything, it redirected it. A few months later, Lucas found himself standing in a very different room. Not quiet, not empty. This place was filled with voices, movement, purpose. Papers stacked neatly, people talking, plans unfolding in real time. Megan glanced at him from across the table. Are you ready? Lucas looked down at the document in front of him, his name printed clearly at the bottom. For a second, he didn't sign. Not because he was unsure, but because he understood exactly what it meant now. It's not about fixing anything, he said quietly. Megan gave a small nod. It's about not letting it happen again. Lucas picked up the pen, then signed. The name at the top of the document read, Harold Whitman Foundation, for Forgotten Fathers. The room didn't react dramatically. No applause. No big moment. Just a quiet shift, something beginning instead of ending. We'll start with outreach programs, someone said from the side. Elder support, community connection, maybe legal aid for isolated seniors. Lucas listened, but his attention drifted for just a second. Not away, but inward. Because this wasn't charity. Not really. It was acknowledgement. A way of giving shape to something he had only understood too late. He leaned back slightly, watching the room move around him, then spoke again, more certain this time. Make sure we don't just help them, he said. Make sure we see them. That was the part that mattered. Not money. Not structure. Recognition. And for the first time, Lucas felt something settle, not as guilt, not as regret, but as meaning that would last beyond him. Even with everything moving forward, something small still stayed behind. It didn't interrupt his work. It didn't stop his progress. It just waited. One evening, Lucas opened an old folder on his laptop. No reason. Just habit. Photos appeared. Younger versions of himself. Parties. Events. Perfectly framed moments. He paused on one image. A celebration outside his office. Colleagues around him. Smiling. Applauding. And there, barely in the corner, through the glass reflection, a familiar figure. Harold. Standing outside again. Lucas leaned closer, his breath slowing. He hadn't noticed it before. Not once. How did I miss that? He whispered. No answer came. Because this time, it was clear. It wasn't hidden. He just never looked. Lucas stared at the screen a little longer, then slowly closed the laptop. Not because the story ended, but because it finally made sense. And that's where it turns to you. Right now. Not later. Not someday. Now. Because somewhere in your life, there's a call you've been ignoring. A message you keep putting off. A person you assume will always be there. Which one are you? Lucas would probably ask if he could. The one who walks away, or the one who waits? So be honest. Are you Lucas, or Harold? Are you part of Team Forgive, believing there's still time to fix things? Or Team Too Late, the moment when you realize it's already gone? And here's the question you can't avoid. Are you missing your father, even while he's still here,